Vietnam by changing the colors of the bodies in that country. It's a military solution in a problem that requires a very, very sophisticated political solution. And all that it will do in the end is possibly intricate us into a much, much deeper war than we are in now, or at least allow us to withdraw in time for the elections of next year, when the president can say, yes, indeed, we did withdraw, at which time more Americans will have lost their lives and more Vietnamese will have lost their lives needlessly. Now, when we talk about something like war crimes, we're not throwing this term out lightly. The Hague Convention, the Geneva Conventions, history has laid down certain laws of warfare. Hague Convention, I believe, Article 4, states that you are not allowed to bombard uninhabited villages or villages that are not occupied by defendants. We have done that constantly in Vietnam.
You served in the same unit as I did, John. Can you tell me about any war crimes that occurred in that unit, Coastal Division 11? And a second question, why didn't you attempt to get out of the unit or submit a request when you were there if you saw anything that shocked a normal man?
Well, I'll come back to the question.
I'd like you to answer that question if you would. We served, you obviously are quite good on the polished rhetoric, but I did serve in the same place you did, and not for 4 months, but for 18 months, and I never saw anything, and I'd like you to tell me about the war crimes you saw committed there, and also why you didn't do something about them, although you were there at a different time.
Did you serve in a free fire zone?
I certainly did serve in free fire zones.
Free fire zone, in which we kill anything that moves man, woman, or child. This practice suspends the distinction between combatant and non-combatant and contravenes Geneva Convention Article 3.1.
Where is
That's
that
war crime.
from, John?
The Geneva Conventions. You've heard of that?
Oh, I suggest.
May I complete my statement
sure,
for once
go ahead.
this evening? Thank you. Yes, we did participate in war crimes in Coastal Division 11 because, as I said earlier, we took part in free fire zones, harassment, interdiction, fire, and search and destroy missions. The concept of operations, I gather, changed somewhat from the time when I was there and the time when you were there later on. And I believe that we moved into operations called Silver Mace 2 and some others in which we were not quite involved in this. But I know that there's no way in the world you can say that you didn't drive through the Kualan River or the Bodie River and see huts along the sides of the rivers that were totally destroyed. Did you see them destroyed? Were they destroyed?
May I answer the question?
Were they destroyed?
I'd like to answer that question very fully. On those particular raids, as you and I both know, John.
How do you know?
From the time.
Were you on them?
Yes, I was on the other side. Absolutely correct. I certainly was.
Sea Lords raids.
That's absolutely correct.
And you never burned a village?
I'd like to continue with my statement, if I may. No, I never burned a village. That's absolutely correct. On those particular raids, as you know, from the time you came into the Kualan River to the time you left the Bodie, you were receiving almost continuous fire the entire time. If you went on a little further, and I had the experience of being there after you, which is fortunate, you would have seen that right there on the Kualan River at the present time, there's a village of 10,000 people that came out from that entire area, refugees not from us, but refugees from the Viet Cong, people who came there just to have their own type of government and just to be free. And I think we all realize that as honorable men, we'd never, I don't know the semantics perhaps as well as you, but we all realize that we'd never do anything dishonorable. And I think that you must realize that you would have done something about it then. I think it was only the fact that a fellow changes when he runs for congressman from Massachusetts. That's what's accounts for your particular change.
If I can... First of all, we did...
Excuse me, John, you may answer those after this commercial from a car with 25 years of improvement. We're back, and two of the charges against John Kerry at the moment that I remember are why didn't he leave when war crimes were being committed in front of him. And I'm going to finish this sentence. And has your attitude changed because of your political ambitions? Those are two things that were mentioned.
Well, I hardly think the second really merits that much discussion or consideration. The fact of the matter is that the members of Coastal Division 11 and Coastal Division 13, when I was in Vietnam, were fighting the policy very, very hard, to the point that many of the members were refusing to carry out orders on some of their missions. to the point where the crews started to, in fact, mutiny, say, I would not go back in the rivers again. The point where my commanding officer was relieved of duty because he pressed our objections to what we were doing with the captain in command of the entire operation.
The man above you was relieved of duty?
That is correct. The man above me was finally relieved of duty, to the point that we had a continual rotation going on of new officers coming from the divisions that were not in this to try and replenish our spirit, to the point that the commanding admiral of all forces in Vietnam and General Abrams himself flew us to Saigon, completely stopped the war, put us in an airplane, we put on our khakis and went up there, and were briefed for an entire day and told how what we were doing was writing Navy legends and how we were writing a new kind of history in the war, and so on and so on. And then we returned to go back into the rivers to do the same thing. The fact of the matter remains that after I received my third wound and was told that I could return to the United States, I deliberated for about 2 weeks because there was a very difficult decision in whether or not you leave your friends because you have an opportunity to go. But I finally made the decision to go back and did leave of my own volition because I felt that I could do more against the war back here. And when I got back here, I was serving as an aide to an admiral in New York City, and I wrote a letter through him requesting that I be released from the Navy early because of my opposition, and I was granted that release, and I've been working against the war ever since then. So I don't think that it's a question of principles that change or of ideals or the fact that we didn't try and fight it over there. That's just not true at all. We did. The bigger issue at hand is the question, literally, of how the United States is going to get out of Vietnam now. And I have said again and again this evening that we can set a date, that we can bring the prisoners home, but the point is, I think this administration is still seeking some kind of victory over there. It is still committed to the idea totally of a non-communist regime, and I think that that's unrealistic in terms of the political forces that are at play in South Vietnam, in fact, in all of Southeast Asia. And we have learned, if we haven't learned anything by now, that we simply can't impose a settlement ourselves. I just don't understand how they believe, or how this other group believes, that the Vietnamese are going to succeed in doing with 50,000 Americans what they haven't been able to do with 500,000 Americans, and I'd like that explained.
I'd like to respond to both of those points. The first point is I served in Coastal Division 11 for 12 months, not 4. I never saw any moral protest there. I think that the story Mr. Kerry has told, if you take a look at it and talk to the people involved, including that admiral who is now the Chief of Naval Operations, is in large measure prefabrication. The reason they were brought to Saigon wasn't, and here I'm not speaking from first-person knowledge, but there are a number of people I know that could. The reason they were brought there was because they had taken such severe casualties. And the great majority of people in that coastal division weren't opposed to the war. As I understand, Mr. Kerry's release from the Navy got it to run for Congress, which was his way against working, against the war. He didn't go down and work at the polls like everybody else. He just ran for Congress. On the Vietnamization program of the President, I don't think there's any rational man in this country that believes we should have a military solution any longer to the Vietnam War. The people that escalated the war, as I've indicated, are the same people that are close friends of Mr. Kerry at the present time. I think the point and parcel and fact of the matter is that we never relied on the Vietnamese. We never armed them. We never had any strategy there until about 1968. When we turned to Vietnamization, we gave them for the first time M16s. We turned over a Navy to them. We gave them helicopters. And that as we've withdrawn, the truth is in the telling, is in what's happened. As we've withdrawn down to where we have 1/3 of the forces that we had there when Mr. Kerry and I were there, the South Vietnamese still remain free. They've still inflicted severe casualties on the North Vietnamese wherever they've been attacked. Fire Base Buller being a classic example of it.
Here, 5 years from now, we will be out of there completely, and the South Vietnamese will be, there will be a non-communist South Vietnamese.
I think, I agree with Mr. Kerry. His innuendo, of course, is unique, that somebody would withdraw in time for the election in order to win an election. Mr. Humphrey's already indicated his opinion of it. I think it's quite obvious that we're going to be out of there in terms of ground forces, in terms of almost everything within the next year and a half, that the way we're going to help them out is through giving them economic and military aid, which is the same thing the North Vietnamese received from the Chinese and from the Soviets at the present time.
Interruption. Local stations have a message. We'll be right back.